Imagine waking up one morning to a letter from your HOA demanding that you move your dock, or else face hefty fines. Sounds frustrating, right? But here's the twist. What they didn't know was that I owned the entire shoreline. This is the true story of how an HOA tried to flex its power, unaware that they were challenging the wrong person. It all started when I received a letter in the mail, claiming my dock was violating some obscure rules. The letter was short, to the point, and filled with legal jargon. At first, I thought it was some kind of mistake, but the more I read, the more I realized they were serious. So naturally, I decided to do some digging. What I uncovered would turn the tables in a way no one, especially the HOA, expected. Turns out, I wasn't just another homeowner. They had no idea I held the deed to the whole stretch of shoreline, making their demand completely ridiculous. But this is where things get interesting. Instead of backing down, they doubled down, and that's when the real battle began. How far would they go? And will I stand my ground? Stick around, because this story is far from over. I'll admit, at first I thought this was just some mix-up. The HOA had always been a bit overbearing, but I never imagined they'd come after me like this. I'd been living on the lake for years, and the dock I'd built was part of the property when I moved in. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a simple wooden dock for fishing and enjoying the view. It seemed like the perfect setup until the HOA sent that letter. So, I decided to take a closer look at the legal documents. I went back to the original property deed, and that's when I made a shocking discovery. I didn't just own my house and a few acres. I owned the entire stretch of shoreline that the HOA had been controlling. They had no claim over my dock or the land surrounding it. It felt like a huge weight lifted off my shoulders, but I knew this wasn't going to be as simple as showing them a piece of paper. I contacted a lawyer just to make sure I was reading everything right. After all, dealing with an HOA can be tricky, even when you're in the right. But as I started to prepare my response, I noticed something strange. The HOA wasn't backing down. They were relentless, and it seemed like they had more at stake than just enforcing some rules. What were they really after? And why weren't they giving up? I had a feeling I was about to find out. As I delved deeper into the situation, I realized that the HOA wasn't acting on behalf of some simple rule enforcement. There was a deeper motivation lurking beneath the surface. I spoke to a few neighbors who had been through similar battles with the HOA, and their stories made me more suspicious. One of them, an older woman who'd lived in the neighborhood for decades, told me how the HOA had been slowly tightening its grip on the entire community. At first, it was just small things, repainting fences a certain color, trimming trees a specific way. But now, it seemed like they were trying to control everything, from boat docks to yard decorations. The more I learned, the clearer it became that this wasn't just about my dock. The HOA was pushing an agenda, one that they clearly weren't being upfront about. They were coming after me because my property stood in the way of their bigger plans. But what exactly were those plans? I still didn't know, but it was becoming obvious that the HOA had bigger ambitions than just maintaining the neighborhood's appearance. I also started to feel the pressure from other sides. A few of my neighbors, who had always been friendly, began avoiding me. I'd overheard a couple of them talking one evening by the lake, whispering about how the HOA was on the warpath and how it was better to stay out of it. It was like they knew something I didn't, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap door till I wasn't about to back down, not when I knew I was in the right. But as the HOA kept sending more letters, pushing for meetings, and even threatening legal action, I realized this wasn't just about a dock. It was a test of power, and they weren't going to stop until they had me on my knees. The tension between me and the HOA started escalating fast. It wasn't just about the dock anymore, it was about control. They kept sending notices, each one more threatening than the last. I could feel the pressure mounting with every passing day. I tried to stand my ground, but the more I resisted, the more aggressive they became. I even had one of their representatives show up at my door one afternoon, demanding I take immediate action to remove the dock or face legal consequences. I wasn't the only one they were targeting. As I dug into the HOA's past dealings, I realized they'd been quietly pushing other homeowners into making costly changes to their properties. Some had been intimidated into renovations they couldn't afford, others into giving up their long-held rights to certain parts of their land. It was becoming clear that the HOA wasn't just about enforcing rules, it was about profiting from fear, and they were willing to bulldoze anyone who stood in their way. But what really hit me was the meeting invitation that arrived in my mailbox. It was a formal request, demanding that I appear before the HOA board to discuss the dock. The letter made it clear. This wasn't just a friendly conversation, this was going to be a showdown. I couldn't help but wonder if they had something bigger planned, maybe even a way to take more than just my dock. I knew the meeting would be the turning point. I could either back down and give them control over my property, or I could stand my ground and face whatever they had planned. It felt like everything was building to this one moment. As the meeting day drew closer, I couldn't shake the feeling that the HOA was hiding something bigger, something they didn't want anyone to find out. But what could it be? What was their real endgame? The night before the HOA meeting, I was going over my documents one more time when I noticed something strange, an old survey map buried in the back of my property records. I hadn't paid much attention to it before, but this time something jumped out at me. There, clearly marked, was a narrow strip of land that extended beyond my shoreline, and it wasn't just mine. It cut across several lots that the HOA claimed to control. It looked like a forgotten boundary line, one that hadn't been updated in years. If this map was accurate, it meant the HOA didn't legally control a huge portion of land they'd been enforcing rules over for who knows how long. Suddenly, it all made sense. The aggressive push about my dock wasn't random. They knew, or at least suspected, if I pushed back hard enough, their entire foundation might crack. The HOA's authority could come under serious legal fire, and if other homeowners found out, the whole board could be exposed for enforcing rules on land they didn't even manage. The next morning, just hours before the meeting, I got an anonymous envelope on my doorstep. No return address, just a single typed note inside. Asterisk, be careful. You're not the first to fight this, but you might be the last. Asterisk. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just a neighborhood dispute. It was something much bigger, and I was in deep. The day of the HOA meeting felt like walking into a storm. The room was packed, more neighbors than I'd ever seen show up before. The board sat at the front, stiff and confident, with papers neatly stacked in front of them. They clearly thought they had the upper hand, but I came prepared, with my deed, the survey map, and a lawyer by my side. They started by reading their formal complaint against me, still insisting my dock violated community guidelines. I let them talk. Then, when it was my turn, I calmly laid everything out. I showed them the land deed, clearly proving I owned the entire shoreline. Then I pulled out the survey map, highlighting how it showed parts of the land they'd been regulating didn't even fall under their jurisdiction. You could feel the shift in the room. The board started whispering among themselves, the confidence slipping from their faces. Then came the final blow. My lawyer handed them a letter outlining our intent to take legal action if the harassment continued. At that point, they had no choice but to back off. They recessed the meeting early and promised to review the documents. But the damage was done. Barum had seen the truth. Just as I thought it was over, one of the board members quietly approached me outside. He looked nervous and handed me a flash drive. I shouldn't be doing this, he said, but if you want to know why they really wanted your dock gone, look the files. Turns out, owning the shoreline didn't just protect my rights, it stopped a hidden land grab in its tracks. After I saw what was on that flash drive, everything made sense. The HOA hadn't just been enforcing dock regulations, they were setting the stage for a private development, hoping no one would question them. My property, and more importantly, my dock, stood directly in their way. If I had given in, they would have quietly pushed forward with their project, changing the shoreline forever without anyone knowing. I sent the files to a few trusted neighbors, and within days, word spread through the community. A group of us banded together and called for a special meeting to challenge the board's actions. With pressure mounting, several board members resigned, including the one who gave me the flash drive.